I did not pick it. I pick it. Hey, I did not pick it. I pick it. Shaking my meal, I get it. Baby, I so swan, I pick it. I pick it. Kimbalude.
This is for the market. This is for the market.
But I am gonna spend the money.
This is for the market.
Everybody. I did not pick it. I pick it. Hey, I did not pick it. I pick it. Shaking my meal, I get it. Baby, I so swan, I pick it. I pick it. Kimbalude.
This is for the market. This is for the market.
But I am gonna spend the money.
This is for the market.
Everybody.
Can I go ahead? Yeah, okay. Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Greater Accra Bar. I had put a notice in the chat box that we would start at 1:15, but please indulge us so that we can start at 1:20. So thank you. Sydney. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen of the Greater Accra Bar. You are welcome to the second meeting of the year, and we are happy that today we are able to take advantage of the Mental Health Month to speak to ourselves about our well-being as lawyers, as practitioners, as family people. And so we are happy to have all of you here. If you could please share the link for all your mates and friends to join, we'll be very, very happy. We'll start with an opening prayer, which I would have to render myself. So shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for an opportunity to meet as lawyers, to deliberate about matters affecting ourselves. We pray and thank you that you have granted us the grace to be alive, to be part of this program. We pray that you would join us and be amongst us and guide us, speak to us through our speaker, that at the end of the day, we'll give glory and honor to your name. We thank you for hearing our prayers, having prayed through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Without taking too much time, I would invite our Vice President, Mr. Yao Apaobin, to give us a few remarks and introduce our speaker for the day to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nene. Good afternoon, members of the Greater Accra Regional Bar, and thanks for joining this session. This May, in recognition of the Mental Health Month, the Ghana Bar, the Greater Accra Bar, in partnership with the Wholesome Mind, decided to hold this session this afternoon. And the topic for today is Preserving Your Equilibrium, Lawyers' Guide to Mental Awareness. Having regard to the nature and demands of our profession, it is important that we get insights into how our mental health is or may be impacted by the very demands of the profession. But before I introduce the speaker, let me take this opportunity to once again speak to you about our upcoming project at Kese Adan as part of this year's Bar Conference activity. We have shared a lot of flyers around in which we have been appealing for funds for members to contribute toward this project. And our target, as you are aware, is the sum of 450,000 Ghana cedis. Our target is that if we have about 2,000 people contributing, an amount of 225 Ghana cedis each, we should be able to reach our target. We realize that if members are generous and are willing to contribute about 450 Ghana cedis, we should have about 1,000 people coming up with this money. We notice again that if we are going to continue to ensure more generosity, and we have 450 people deciding to fund the project, that will require 1,000 cedis per head. And I believe that as lawyers in Greater Accra, we are much more capable. Let me say that at this point, construction has started. We are workmen on the grounds at Kese, and some of you have already contributed, but we are nowhere near our target. That is why we are appealing to you this afternoon that let's double up. We're going to ensure that we commission this project before the conference in September. Now, we have a short code that we circulated, but for the purpose of this gathering, let me repeat it again. The short code is *776*123# on all networks. So please, if you want to send by Momo, you're allowed to. We also have a Momo number, which is 059-632-8407. For those who want to write checks, please write your check in the name of Greater Accra Bar Association. And when you do this, please notify any of the executives. We'll be willing to drive to your office and pick the check up. So please, let's continue to support this project as it brings smiles on the face of the people in the Kesa community. Now, let me, at this point, introduce our speaker for the event. Our speaker is Dr. Seth Mawusi Asafo. Dr. Seth Mawusi Asafo is a seasoned clinical psychologist and respected faculty member of both the University of Ghana Medical School and the Accra College of Medicine. With a rich academic and practical background in psychology, clinical psychology, and public mental health, he has become a pivotal figure in advancing mental wellness and psychological resilience across Ghana. He's an active member of the Ghana Psychological Association and the American Psychological Association, currently serving as the National Secretary of the Ghana Psychological Association. Seth has previously served as a school counselor at Ghana International School and continues to provide affiliate psychological services to institutions such as SOS, Faith Montessori, and others. In the corporate wellness space, Seth has led impactful interventions and employee mental health programs for top institutions including APSA, Access Bank, GCB PLC, Fidelity Bank, GIZ, Ashanti Goldfields, Asanko Gold, Puma Energy, Ghana Gas, and Enterprise Insurance. His expertise spans areas such as stress and burnout management, emotional intelligence, holistic well-being, work-life balance, change management, sleep mastery, and modern self-care. A passionate advocate for mental health awareness, Seth was also the host of the Beautiful Minds radio show on Asasi Radio, using media as a platform for public education and advocacy on mental health. With a reputation for empathy, clarity, and evidence-based insights, Seth continues to shape conversations and interventions around mental health at both institutional and national levels. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. I am humbled to have this opportunity to provide a short webinar and in-person session on mental wellness for the legal profession. Now, before I even start, I would like to ask the question, how many of us, so by show of hands, whether online or in person, how many of us have had a physical medical checkup done this year? And for the number of people that would raise their hand or have, I would also go ahead to ask how many of them have had an emotional or psychological check-in. And you'll notice that the numbers would be far more less than anticipated. Now, the reality is, most of the time when we talk about mental wellness, people tend to think about madness only, and I would like to help us all deviate from that particular perception, because it's the basis for why mental health is in the stage in which it is. There's so much stigma. So let me first ask a simple question. How are you feeling now, currently, in this year? How are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? Where 5 says that you're having a range of negative emotions, being terrified, jealous, furious, and 1 being the more positive of emotions, being calm, happy, and peaceful. Where are you really? Now, I do know that many people are not in tune with their emotions. And whenever we talk about mental health, our emotions are one of the key things that we would like to emphasize. So let's take a little dive and then see if we can come back and see where we really are functioning. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of the times when people hear mental health, what they think about is that person on the street who's unkempt and they have a baggage of things around them. And so whenever someone says, go and see a professional, like, I'm not mad, well, mental health goes beyond madness. Now, typically when we say mental health, we're looking at our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it encompasses the way we think, the way we feel, and then the way we act. So most of the time, the person you see on the street is the person whose thinking faculties have been compromised. And in essence, they look at us also as being very unusual and abnormal, because the perception of what is happening is very different from the way we see it. Now, beyond that comes our emotions, or how we feel. So if you look at concepts such as someone being extremely angry all the time, or they're always on the edge, to the point that even when you say good morning, they might say, I know you want to greet, but why are you shouting? People who would also fall on that spectrum of mental health. It would look at people who are extremely shy, so that to stand in front of people and even speak or be under the scrutiny of other people may make them feel a certain type of way. How about that person who's extremely fearful or worried excessively? They worry about everything from traffic to rain. There's cause to worry about rain and floods, but these ones are a bit
unnecessary, even to the point of fearing what would happen to their children, even when they're in a safe environment. And we know that a lot of parents have become helicopter parents. They don't even allow their children to go out to play, and they'll say things like they'll get dirty. Very interesting. As if we didn't have washing machines and, all the other things. Now, mental health goes a step further, also to look at the way that we handle stress. Now, there is nobody here who can say that they do not experience stress. And you can never evade stress, but you can obviously manage stress. It looks also at our relationships, how we connect with people, and then the lifestyle choices that we make. So the facet of mental health that many people are aware of is only the thinking faculty. But now I've expanded it beyond that. So whenever they say mental health, always think about it from the perspective that it encompasses so much more. Now, I like to liken mental health also to our physical health. And I'll create this analogy that there are days that you wake up and you're not feeling yourself 100%. You're not your topmost self, but you're not sick. You probably just aren't in that space where you have enough energy to get you to do stuff. Same thing happens for mental health. So I want you to start picturing mental health not as an absolute state, but as a continuum, or think about it like a ladder. Now, when it comes to ladders, you can climb up or you can climb down. So the power really is in your hands. There are things that you can do to enhance your mental health and other things that can make your mental health equally decline. And comes to lifestyle. So it is very common, and it's a key stigma with many people in the legal profession, that you don't sleep much. And the interesting bit there is that a lot of people these days make wild boasts like, this whole year I've only slept 2 hours, and they are happy about it. Unfortunately, that only leads you closer and closer to your grave. And those kinds of lifestyles or things that you do can enhance your mental health. So just like physical health, when you exercise, your physical health goes up. Mental health does same. If you rest, same thing happens. If you eat appropriately, same thing happens. So do not look at mental health as an absolute state that you have or you don't have. Life definitely throws bombs at us, and that also impacts our mental health. But essentially, the power is in our hands to control how our mental health goes up or down. Now, how do I know if my mental health is taking a hit? So a lot of the times, I suppose the dominant feature of why there's so much stigma also in mental health is because people look at mental health like mental illness. But there's a difference. Mental health is a state that everybody has, but mental illness is when your mental health status falls below the ladder I talked about. So now it's going below the ladder. You say somebody now has an illness. Now, majority of the things that I will discuss here are symptoms of when mental health starts to take a hit. And some of them may be extreme, but majority of them we all experience. So number one, when someone's mental health is in crisis, they may have persistent sadness or prolonged feelings of unhappiness or loss of interest. So such people may previously have enjoyed certain things, and then suddenly they're not interested again. So if you attempt to call them to do something with you, they might say, no, I'm not interested, or they're making excuses because they don't feel it as fulfilling as it used to be. So they seem to be sad most of the time. Now, some people may also have mood swings. So such people are so unpredictable to be around. They confuse you a lot of the times. You're speaking to them one moment, you're all laughing, and then you might have said something or gestured something or taking a posture or maybe even sneezed, and suddenly their mood switches and then you get confused. What did I do? What did I say? Now, such people may move from extremes of high excitement to extremes of lows or anger, and that can be very confusing. Now, in extreme cases, people actually experience what we call delusions, and delusions are strongly held beliefs that even when you provide evidence against, the person does not believe. So this wouldn't hold up in court, really. Whatever evidence you provide, the judge, which is that person, says, nope, it doesn't work because I believe what I believe. And in the corporate in the corporate space, one of the most significant delusions that we notice is how people believe that other people are persecuting them or people are working against them. And we call those paranoid delusions. So it's a sense that the world is out there to get you and you are consistently looking and scheming around to see who's really out there. It gets interesting because there are some delusions that are based on sometimes someone, like I had a client who would go into a restaurant with his partner, and as soon as the waiter said hello, the partner would get upset and say, you're cheating with this one too, right? And there was no evidence for it. These are strongly held beliefs. A few years ago, the floods came to Circle, and there was one lady who we had taken to the clinic to work with. She started by telling us that she was the reason for the floods. She's the reason for the fires. She's a witch, and essentially she caused all the death. And so she was put on medication, and a few weeks later, the same questions were asked, and she said, why would I do that? So that's what delusions actually look like. And these are extreme forms of mental health related challenges. Now, there is also a very classic symptom of consistent fatigue, so being tired all the time. And this happens also because most of the time when you have a mental health decline, you tend to overthink a lot, or you're going through a lot of stress. And so your body consumes a lot of the energy that you have. And so you're tired. Little activities may leave you feeling depleted. A lot of people also experience sleep disturbances. Mind you, to understand it even better, when you are in any kind of mental health related decline, you experience a lot of stress. Stress is explained in the brain as danger. So think about it this way. How easy is it for you to fall asleep when you're experiencing danger? You don't want to be sleeping when you're actually in danger, so people experience problems sleeping, and these may be localized around the facts of not being able to go to bed, or going to bed and waking up several times before the morning, or waking up and not being able to go to bed again. Now, some people also get into the habit of worrying consistently about everything and anything. Of course, life has its own worries, but when people's mental health is taking a decline, they worry excessively about unnecessary things. Could be traffic, could be their partners, could be their finances, not because they are struggling, but just anticipating 10 years from now, would I have food to eat, which of course is irreasonable in this moment. Now, we also have, in extreme cases, people start to have hallucinations, and these have to do with their senses. So in hallucinations, people either see things that others cannot see, hear voices others cannot hear, feel things on their body, smell things, or taste things that other people cannot hear. So sometimes we do know that when people consume some forms of psychoactive substances, they start to hallucinate. They're having a full-blown chat with another person that you cannot see, and you might think it's spiritual, but spiritual. Now, in some cases also, you have people starting to withdraw from other people. So withdrawal and isolation is classic of mental health decline. And what makes it even more interesting is the people who are going through periods like this are taking a hit mentally. They believe the world does not want them. They think they're a liability, they're a problem, so they start to withdraw. Now, what most of us typically do is we'll try to engage once or twice and we say, they are obnoxious, they are too known. So we leave them. And then a confirmatory bias comes to say, oh yes, it's true. Nobody really cares, or I'm a bother to many people. So then they feel within themselves that what they believe is actually accurate, and that further exacerbates what they experience. Now, some people may also experience changes in appetite and weight. So for a lot of people, they may lose weight, but for other people, they may gain a lot of weight because they start to cope by eating. Typically, when you eat, the brain releases a chemical called dopamine that gives you a sense of happiness or euphoria. So whenever you eat and you feel excited, it's simply because little dopamine is being released. Now, for many people, when they're going through mental health decline and struggles, the discomfort they face pushes them to look for something to make them feel a sense of happiness again. So if I eat and I feel happy, then I must be looking for happiness from eating. So they tend to eat not because they are hungry, but they eat simply to feel a sense of happiness again. And that, of course, then pushes them to a lot of metabolic related issues that brings about weight gain, and the whole fruit bowl follows afterwards. Then we have problems with concentration. So typically when you're going through a lot of things, your mind is half the time roaming. So you might be here, but you're not here. And I'm sure there are people online or sitting here who are not here. They are thinking about all the things that, could possibly happen. Now, when you do that, it gets very difficult for things that are happening around you to make an impression enough for you to remember. So classic within the concentration is, if you can't focus enough, it's difficult to make decisions. Always remember that to have a whole being, your mental health and your physical health must be in the same spot. And so when we say a healthy body is a healthy mind, and a healthy mind is a healthy body, we actually are saying the same thing. Now, you can never talk about mental well-being without talking about a very key concept of stress. And as usual, we say that stress is what happens to us when demands are put before us that we need to meet. Now, people only feel stress when they believe their coping resources are inadequate to meet the demand that they have to meet. However, psychologists would tell you that everybody needs stress in order to thrive. So short bouts of stress are good, and that's what we call eustress. So I want you to cast your mind back to a situation where perhaps you had an exam to write, and you have all written exams, of course. And before those exams, there was an energy that kept you awake even if you wanted to fall asleep. That is positive stress. It's goal-oriented. It pushes you and gives you motivation. Unfortunately, the other side of positive stress is distress, when stress becomes accumulated or when stress is never-ending. So, for example, if you are in a relationship, whether it's professional or personal, which is very toxic, and you're feeling stressed every single day, it doesn't go away, or being in an abusive relationship, those would be chronic stress. On the other hand is when you have little bits of stress accumulate so much that they become a mountain that essentially drowns you. So let me paint a picture for you. In Accra, you wake up very early just to get to work because you live a little far off and the traffic is unbearable these days. More importantly is, in the modern world, before you get to work, you would have been upset 2 or 3 times because of some okada, either cutting you off or breaking off your side mirror. So you're already, upset before you get to the office. And then as soon as you get to the office and you see that office building, you go like, oh my God, today again. Then you meet your favorite employee or supervisor or manager. When I say favorite, that person. And then your BP spiking, and then you have to deal with clients who feel that they know better than you because, they are Googling everything and AI and everything. And so you've dealt with all of that, and you get back into the traffic heading home, and you hope that you'd have some calm and respite. Unfortunately, you go home to meet Marijata, which could be your partner or your children or even Dumso. So you can imagine the kind of stress that we have to go through every single day, and this becomes cumulative, which then is problematic for us. Now, how do I know? And let me stress this. Now, when it comes to what causes mental health related challenges, there are the biological factors, which obviously are the genetics, people would say runs through the blood. And then we also have structural challenges. For example, a bump or a tumor or an injury to specific parts of the brain can cause people to act in certain ways. But then also are the environmental. So the things that happen or have happened as you have grown, being toxic relationships, having environments that were not nurturing are part, and also the lifestyle of substances and things that we consume. So we know that psychoactive drugs like marijuana, cocaine, heroin can push you to a place where you experience a mental health decline. Now, notice that for many people, and you all know someone, they were doing well until something significant happened. They lost a loved one, there was a broken relationship, there was a robbery, and suddenly they lost their mind. So stress is the necessary trigger to push people into a mental health decline that could even worse off get into a mental health illness. Now, how do I know that I'm experiencing stress? Typically, stress will show in 4 domains: physically in your body, cognitively in the way you think, emotionally in the way you feel, and behaviorally in the way that you act. And I'm only going to highlight one of them. So, for example, physically, if you tend to experience a lot of pain in your muscles, especially the big muscles, your back, your shoulder, and your neck, those are typically stress related pains, and this is how they happen. So your brain explains everything you experience as a danger if it's not used to it. Okay, so when that happens, it attempts to prepare you for battle, and the brain treats every stressor as physical. So your heart starts to beat, pumps blood into your major muscles to allow you stand and fight or to run away. Now that would make sense if you were faced with an actual threat. But in the modern world, you have threats that are related to finances and traffic and relationships, etc. So the blood's being pumped to the muscles, but it's not used, and that causes the tension in those big muscles. And that's why one of the key things you can do to mitigate this is to exercise or keep active during the day. So there are lots of people who have physical health concerns that stem from unresolved emotions, etc. In the modern world, we also do notice in our clinics how lots of people physically feel sick, but there's nothing wrong with them, and they tend to explain this as spiritual. Somebody is zapping them. But today I want you to understand that, especially with your emotions, if you're not expressing them and they stay internalized, they can cause you to feel sick physically. And there's no medication that can treat that except the things that I will tell you as we move on. Now, cognitively, let me give you an example. How many of us have ever, on a commute, sat in a car either driving or as a passenger? You remember getting in the vehicle, you get to your destination, but you don't remember anything that happened along the journey. Now, that tells you that your mind is racing, and that's likely a stress that you're going through. Then, emotionally, there are some people who may show extreme emotions. They're on the edge. The least thing you do, they get upset. Or for some people, you might even just ask them, how are you doing? And it's a very Ghanaian thing to say, I'm fine. And then you push it a little further. How are you really doing? And before you know, they break down. They're almost on the edge. Now, behaviorally, people try to do things to set the balance so they feel a sense of comfort. And here, a lot of people will turn to drugs and alcohol. And the research actually shows that about 38% of people in the legal profession use alcohol as a coping resource, also because it is part of the job to strike deals. It's not me saying, this one is the research, please. I didn't say it. So obviously, because it sanctions it, people might now start using it as a coping without even noticing. In the modern world, one of the biggest coping mechanisms that people have is technology. So we're TikToking a little more, YouTubing a little more than usual, burying ourselves in work and responding to emails because we're attempting to avoid dealing with all the other issues that actually are available. And work is one of those things also. So during COVID, our clinics were booming, and it was an interesting thing. Intimate partner violence or domestic violence had gone up. And simply what we noticed was in the past, a lot of people had coped with their relationship issues by going to work, and then lockdown came. So now they had to deal with it together at home, and so our clinic started to boom. So you'll notice that when people experiencing stress, it shows physically in their body, emotionally in the way they feel, cognitively in their thinking, and then finally in the way they act. Now, a simple analogy to explain what stress is that our brains have evolved to look at stress from a physical point. So our brains are still wired like our Stone Age ancestors. So in as much as we live in modern cities that don't have the usual threats of lions and bears and dinosaurs if they ever existed, today our work stress, our traffic, our relationship quarrels, they keep our stress response active 24/7. And so nobody is exempted from this. Now, let me paint another picture. Notice that whenever you watch a movie, regardless of the fact that logically you know it's a movie, you still respond to it. So you feel fear when you watch horror. The monster won't come out of the screen. We know that. Or that you cry at the end of a movie because your favorite character passes on in part one. Then in part two, they somehow come back to life and they pass on again, and you cry again, and you keep crying in all the versions of the movies they have, and finally meet them at an award show, and then You watch another movie, same thing happens. It doesn't matter if you logically know. The brain is such a powerful tool that whatever you think, your brain creates in great detail. So the majority of the things we worry about become activators of our stresses. Now, psychologists will then tell you also that whenever you face a little bit of stress, it helps to build resilience. And resilience, if you think about it, is like a muscle. So the more you engage in particular things, the stronger those muscles become. So life's challenges actually are good if they are short. If they come, you solve them, you deal with them, your brain builds resilience and is able to deal with them. And I always make this joke about my first heartbreak, which was very painful. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do a lot of things. But the second one, yes, I couldn't sleep, but I was eating well. My soup was going well. And the third one and the fourth one, now the heart is finished. There's nothing. That's what resilience looks like. Now, at the base of any resilience, you have a little bit of pain. So for people that like to work out, if you haven't worked out in a while and you go back to the gym or you go back to your workout routine, you feel pain. But that pain is because the muscles are now expanding. And once they expand, you don't face that again. So little bouts of stress are important. How then are we able to take care of our mental health? I'll try to make it as short as possible, but I want to start with the most important thing, which is taking perspectives. Now, I said earlier that human beings operate on our thoughts, which push our emotions, and our emotions usually would push our actions. That's the sequence, okay? Now, sometimes the problem is the way we interpret what is happening changes what we're feeling in the moment. So I don't like it when I drive and someone overtakes me. It makes me feel as if, they think they are faster than me, or they drive better, or they are the only ones who need to get to work early. And so what I usually do is that you overtake me, I will cut back, or if you cut me off, I'll cut you off too. And there are instances where I would not just cut you off, but I'll come out of the car. And then one day I tried, and the person who came, they say big things come in small packages. It was a small car, but the person in the car the guy was huge. So, he came out head first, and I realized there was a problem. And I was looking at him and doing, oh, boss. But that's something I do. And the reason why I get so upset when someone cuts me off is because of the reasons I thought. They think they're better than you. They think they have a better car. They think, that kind of thing. But one day I was driving from work to the house, and my stomach was rumbling. I was really struggling. And I was driving as all those people had driven in the past, very erratically. Finally got into Chambers. It dawned on me, was it possible that on all those days that they did what they did, they were struggling like you were? So now when someone cuts me off and I'm in a good mood, what I say is they are struggling. Notice the situation hasn't changed. It's the explanation of the situation that's determining how I feel. So perspectives really do matter when it comes to mental health. Each time you think about something that, as it were, aggravates you, it pushes your survival system to kick in. But when you think about it in a more adaptive and positive way, it changes that. I'll give you another example. A client of mine had been having a serious relationship challenge with his partner, so a man and a wife. And this was the situation. My wife calls me too much. She's calling me because she's auditing me, trying to find out if I'm somewhere, his initial thoughts. So I asked him, could there be another reason why, your wife would call you so much? He says, there's nothing. I said, oh, my brother, please, think about it. So then he figures out, okay, maybe because she misses me. And that's what changed the perspective. So in the first case, I'm being audited, so I'm angry. In the second case, she misses me. Now he feels much calmer. So perspectives are such a powerful thing in keeping our minds calm. Now, there are many things that you can do to enhance your mental health and to protect it from decline. And the majority of them are actually free. But if you choose not to take it and then you have to come to me, I promise you, I'll give you a good discount, but you'll pay very much for it. So let's start with the first one. exercise. Why is exercise good for mental well-being? The first reason is simple. It allows for oxygen-rich blood to reach the brain. The second reason is exercising or physical activity pushes motivation to the brain. Now, the research tells us that for many people that do bouts of exercising every day, each time you complete any episode or bout of exercising, the brain rewards you with a little chemical that makes you feel good. Now, that is the chemical of motivation we call dopamine, and it seems to transcend other aspects of your life also. Now, the third thing is, because our minds can be an avenue for worry and stress, exercising is part of the time where you are not worrying about your challenges. Imagine, jogging and thinking about fees. You bump your head or fall in a gutter. So during that period when you're exercising, because you are focused on the activity, your brain shuts out that survival system, which is good. So temporal rest for the brain from worry. Number 2 has to do with relaxation. Now, you cannot be relaxed and be fearful at the same time. Those two are incongruent. And whenever we talk about relaxation, we do things like breathing. And this is the science behind it. Each time we go through a period of stress or worry, what happens is our breathing goes up. So notice that when you are worried, when you're anxious, you start to breathe a little faster because your brain explains it that you're in danger and it needs to release more energy. So you breathe much quicker to release more energy through the oxygen that you consume. Now, in relaxation, because you can manually calm down your breathing, it sends a message back to the brain to say false alarm. There is no challenge out there. So you can manually take charge by taking deep, long breaths. And I'll try and show us a few of those breathing techniques. But let's just try one. Put one hand on your chest, put the other hand on your stomach, and then you just follow my lead. Breathe in, and out. All right, let's try that again. Breathe in and out. Okay, well, unfortunately, I feel very sad to tell you, or you're not breathing well. And it's simply because in deep breathing, or what we call diaphragmatic breathing, your stomach moves before your chest. But majority of you are breathing chest before stomach. So you're taking half breaths, which are not adequate. So if you want to learn the art of breathing so that it calms your system down, is diaphragmatic. The stomach moves first. We'll do it when we are done. So relaxation is also very important. Now, time outdoors helps also to stimulate the brain. And when you are stimulating the brain, because there's other things that are interesting, the worry signals, fear appraisals, everything goes out because they are new things. So notice that when you move away from an environment that you are used to, so it's not traveling outside the country, but if you leave Accra and you go to Cape Coast, you may notice that many of the things that you typically worry about, you don't worry about them because there's so many new things around that your mind picks onto. So stimulating your mind is also a good tool for your mental health. Then comes our diet. Now, every time you have a mental health related decline, or when your mental health is taking a hit as a result of excessive stress, your body also craves excess sugars and fats. So notice that when you are the most stressed, that's when you feel like eating a lot of junk. Now, that's because your sugars go out of balance. The body consumes a lot of the sugar, so there's a deficit. And the deficit pushes you to make up for it. And the quickest way to make up for it is what? Is junk. So every time you start having that reaction, know that you're going through some significant stresses. Now, what are the best foods for your mental health? Fruits, nuts, vegetables, and proteins that are rich in omega-3. And there's an experiment, global experiment going on. There are places they call green zones. These people essentially consume fruits, nuts, vegetables, and proteins rich in omega-3. And when they are put on the stress test, one of those very simple stress tests is exposing them to a lot of cold. They tend to have better tolerance and resistance to the activation of the stress signal as compared to everybody else, including myself. So notice the food. Now, with food also comes when you are actually consuming. So for your mental health, it's important to ensure that you take typically would consume your last meal by 6 if you are attempting to sleep at 9, by 7 if you are attempting to sleep at 10, and it goes on like that. You need 3 hours before you go to bed. Now, for those of us that have smartwatches, I want you to start tracking your sleep and do this simple experiment where you eat and go to bed and you look at your heart rates, your heartbeat ratings. You'll notice that your readings would usually be around 70, 80 beats per minute. And when you have eaten, giving yourself 3 hours, it comes to about 40. And that's one of the hallmarks of deep sleep. So there, the heart is also coasting, and that's a powerful thing for you. So let me transition into sleep. How many hours of sleep are we typically getting? I know that for a lot of people, it's below 6 hours. The recommendation is usually 7 to 9, and the reason is simple. Every day you go to bed, you transition through a cycle of sleep. Takes approximately 90 minutes to complete each cycle. Now, within that completion of each cycle, the body releases a lot of chemicals to restore you. So all through our existence, the only time the brain and the body are cleaned is when you sleep. So when you are not sleeping adequately, first of all, cleaning isn't going on. And one of the most predictable markers for Alzheimer's disease is a lack of sleep, because during the day, the brain piles on for everybody something we call beta amyloid, which is a marker for Alzheimer's later in life. So when you're not sleeping well, you might be at risk. Now, the other thing about sleep is that sleep makes us creative, and sleep makes us great at problem solving. So your brain has, I would call it, two components, the conscious and the unconscious. When you sleep, the unconscious mind takes over. And when you're awake, is the conscious mind. Now, if you have a problem and you're going to bed thinking about that problem, what happens is, because of the endless stores of information you have, your brain starts to piece information together. So you might wake up in the morning and be clearing your bowels, and then you have an aha moment and you say, oh, it's because you are clearing the bowels, when really it's because the brain has been doing problem solving in the background. So that's another reason why sleep is that important. Now, a lot of the times when you don't have complete sleep, so there's something called, we have a difference between sleep quality and sleep quantity. In sleep quantity, you might sleep 13 hours straight, but you don't get the restorative properties. In sleep quality, you might probably sleep 3 hours, but you have that restorative property. And so quality sleep is when you've been able to transition through that 90-minute cycle I spoke about at least 5 times during the night. That seems to be the sweet spot for optimum performance. So whenever we say 7 to 9 hours, what we're really saying is complete at least 5 of those cycles. And so now let me talk about what you can do to sleep better. Temperature, number one. The cooler the temperature, the earlier you sleep, because before you go to bed, your core body temperature needs to drop. If you want to sleep and sustain your sleep, sleep in absolute darkness. Your natural sleep hormone melatonin is produced when you go to bed in darkness. At the same time, if you want to sleep better later in the day, expose yourself to a lot of sunlight, because your body absorbs that sunlight and looks at your, what we call your maximum light exposure and your minimum light exposure, and then, as it were, creates a place of sleep that meets your needs. So for example, if you go out on a rather sunny day, your body absorbs about 30,000 units of lux. On a rainy day, it'll get about 10,000. In a modern office like this, brightly lit, you only get 500. So perhaps if you're not sleeping well, it's because you're sitting in the office all day with this light and not allowing the body to absorb much more. Now, another thing you want to do is that you want to get off your device, especially if you're someone that struggles with sleep. Get off your device at least 90 minutes before bed. We call it a no tech 90. Why? Our phones, televisions, tablets, they emit blue light, and this, especially when you hold close, rises directly onto your master clock and says it's daytime, because the brain explains sleep in terms of darkness and no activity, and then day in terms of activity and light. So if you're on your device too long, it sends a counter message to the brain and says it's daytime, so you can't sleep. At the same time, when you sleep and wake up in the night, everybody wants to look at their clock, but they use their phone. So one, the light writes and says daytime. The second thing is, the moment you look at the time, your brain gets activated and starts calculating how long before the morning. So the moment you look and it's 2, your brain says, okay, 3 hours more. So you can't sleep anymore. So that's something you need to look at. Set your alarm for whatever time you need to wake up. And when you wake up in the middle of the night, don't worry. Your alarm will go off regardless. The last tip I want to give you, do you notice that right before you go to bed, your mind gets fluxed with all the things you should have done, all the things you need to do? And it's because your brain understands that when you sleep, you're at your weakest spot. It fears that you'll forget, so it starts to rehearse. And that's why it keeps going on. So it starts doing 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 4 in the same order. Now, if you keep a notepad by your bed and you write out the things you should do or should have done, your brain now says you have a concrete reference point, so there's no need to rehearse, and it will let you what? Sleep. So those are just a few sleep tips. Then we come to gratitude. Gratitude answers the question, regardless of all the challenges or the things that are going bad, what can I still be grateful for? And what that does is it gives you a little light that allows you to move, and you move towards the end so you can have bigger light. So gratitude helps us to stay present and prevents our mind from roaming into the future, because in the present we have control, in the future we have nothing like that. Now, maintaining some level of routines, and I tell people, don't be too rigid with your routines. Modify your routines every now and then. It's also helpful because routines gives us a sense of structure and a sense of safety. Now, when things go out of balance, the explanation that goes to the brain is something is wrong. So create routines that you can follow and make sure that these routines have things that are interesting enough to keep you sustained. Then socializing or connecting. So the more you connect with people, the more you are able to vent out your frustrations. Now, there's a fun fact that women outlive men by almost 5 years. And some call it they gossip, but I say they vent out. Men keep everything inward, majority of men, to be very, keep everything inward. So when men are going through challenges, they start humming a melody. And if you were to put an instrumental behind it, it will make a nice tune, you know. You'll be doing to your grief. So when people connect, they allow themselves to spill. And when you share, you let down the load internally, and that has an impact on your heart as well as your brain. Now, the next thing about sharing is that people offer solutions also. And for humans, whenever you're going through a challenge and you feel that you're alone, it's much more profound. But when you share and someone says, oh, I've been through something similar, it makes you feel not alone, and that is also a positive. Then avoid the use of maladaptive coping resources, especially alcohol and drugs, psychoactive drugs, and also watch the use of technology as a coping resource. The best coping resources are the ones that start with some pain, but then ensure a smooth sailing afterwards. But any resource that you have to keep engaging to cope becomes problematic. Don't forget that every coping resource works. It allows you to cope, but some can have detrimental impacts. And the last one, especially because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, is that there is strength in weakness. Asking for help is not a bad thing. You ask for help so that someone can guide you. As a therapist, I always give this analogy that many of the challenges that we have as a people, we have their solutions. We're just not sure of them, or we need someone to push us. And I'll give you a practical example. Who has ever been on the phone talking and looking for their phone? Or who's ever been holding their key and been looking for the key? And it takes someone to just point out to you, oh, you are holding the key. That's my job. My job is really to point out to you that you've been holding the solution all this while. And so when we talk about asking for help, know that mental health is not mental illness. It is just a state of well-being. And there are things you can do to enhance it, which we have spoken about, and things that can make it decline. So as we come to an end of this particular session, I want us to all do a few things, a few actionable steps for the remainder of the year. And I hope that you can take stock of how beneficial it's been or otherwise, and then find me and tell me. So the first thing I want you to do is to create a mental health routine which is tailored to your specific needs. And remember, in the mental health routine has to do with your dieting, the way you express, rest and sleep, etc. So look at what you can do. And I really recommend hobbies. For those of us that like exercising, please don't do the artificial exercise. At the beginning of the year, one of the most significant resolutions that everybody has is to go to the gym. So January 1st, Decathlon boost a lot of sales. People go and buy gym equipment and gear. And then 2 weeks down the line, we drop it. So if you want to exercise, do something that you find fun already, something you enjoy. You are more likely to be sustained. Now, the second thing I want us to do to keep ourselves motivated, we need to celebrate the steps towards the goal. A lot of us only focus on the goal, and we never reward ourselves for the steps that we take towards the goal. And that can sometimes be demotivating. Now, let me give you an example. If anybody on here, listening online or in person, has ever fasted and prayed, there's one thing you do more when you fast and pray than fast and pray. You look at the clock. True or false? And when you do look at the clock, this is the amazing thing. On that day only, the clock is almost stagnant. You do so much and come back, it's just 10 minutes. But there are days where essentially you go the whole day, you don't eat, you don't even notice it. So the way the mind works is when you pick up a goal, it spends time asking, can I achieve the goal? But when you start working towards the goal, it says we can do it. So it's really about starting. So I always tell people, when you set goals and expectations, make sure that they are not too audacious or they are not perfectionist labeled goals where it seems like you can't make an error. And I'll tell you a funny story. So when I was in school, I always used to say, all I need is 60 plus 1. When I was writing exams, 60 plus 1. And I basically did that because I allowed myself to believe I could make 39 errors. By saying I could make 39 errors, my brain said it is feasible. So I didn't spend time thinking about can I make the grade, but I spent time actually doing what? Studying. So I could really do my grades much better. So today when I set timetables, what I do is 30 minutes of study, 1.5 hours of what? Play. And nobody understands why, but it's a trick. I trick my brain. My brain believes 30 minutes, put your phone aside, put everything aside. It's feasible, isn't it? But when you get in the zone of enjoying the studying, you'll forget about the other side. So celebrate the little steps towards the main goal. Then prioritize self-care as non-negotiable. And sometimes self-care has to do with boundaries. You take on too much, it's going to be stressful. The stress is going to impact you and you become less productive. So sometimes self-care is just setting a boundary and saying, I said yes, but I'm saying no now. Or, I would like to do it. I'm just hot today. Can I do tomorrow? And I know within the corporate setting, sometimes it's a little difficult. In some corporate settings, you close at 5. But if you leave the office before your boss, you get a query. In other words, you close at 10. And these are all realities that people face. Then allow yourself also to be adaptable to change. Change is a process that we all go through, and change, of course, is something that we feel as stressful. But change also allows us to build more resilience. The different kinds of change that you go through allows you to become a problem solver, and it gives you more or broad-based experience. And then the final one, like I said, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. We want to break the stigma. And breaking the stigma is saying, ask for help. I will attempt to create an analogy of what stress does using the courtroom. Imagine you went to the courtroom and there were no adjournments and the case had to go on and on and on. The judge, the jury, the lawyers all will get what? Exhausted and become less what? Effective. So look at managing your stress. to improve your well-being as little adjournments that allow you to go and come back prepared even better to deal with the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doc. I believe it's time for us to ask questions. For those online, if you could drop your questions in the Q&A box, I'll read them out and then Doc would respond to them. So let me see whether we have any questions online as of now. Cannot find any question online. I don't know whether in person, we have a few people in person here. If there are any questions, but I will ask a question. So let me ask and then I'll see whether there will be some more questions online. So my question is, I'm not able to sleep much. And I'm sure it's partly because I use my phone before I go to bed. Now, is it okay to read a book instead of being on my phone?
That's a very good question. The book obviously is a better option than your phone, but it also depends on what you're reading. Initially I tried to create an analogy of what happens when you watch movies. So if you're reading a book that is a thriller and essentially gets you more stimulated, you're less likely to be able to sleep. So it depends on the book. And one of our students used to tell us in our sleep lectures that the best book to help with sleep is the Bible. According to him, the moment you start reading, the devil will be blowing air on your eyes. And so you fall asleep. So the book obviously is less stimulating, but it also depends on the theme of what you're reading. Thank you.
Is there any more questions? Those in-house. Vice President.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I think in your presentation, you mentioned that there are some biological causes. And my concern is if one has a family history of mental illness, how easy or difficult is it for that person to be able to escape it? Sure.
Thank you. That's a really good question. So that's what I explained earlier, that people may have what we call a genetic predisposition, so it runs through the blood. This is the interesting part. You require a trigger to activate the illness, and that's usually stress. So if you're managing your stresses adequately, you might go through a lifetime, and even though you have the genetic predisposition, you may never experience an episode. That's the reality. But yes, it runs through the blood. There are some specific disorders that have a higher tendency of occurring just because of how proficient they are in the gene structure. Yes. Thank you.
Let me ask another one. So you gave a distinction between mental health and mental illness.
Yes.
Now, when it moves or gets to a point of mental illness, based on your experience and practice, do you have statistics on the level of recovery that you recover, the percentage-wise, that when people get to that mental state, do they come back to normal life?
Absolutely.
What percentage do we have? Sure.
Okay, so to answer that, I will create another analogy and say, when people are diagnosed with hypertension, diabetes, and lupus, etc., would we say that when we're managing it, would we say that they are back to normal functioning? Then obviously it's the same thing. Now, the problem most of the time with our kind of treatments is that people liken our treatments to like malaria. So I have an episode, because many mental health conditions occur in episodes. So I have an episode where I'm feeling really down, and then I take my medication, I get better, and then I stop. But it doesn't work that way. Just like if you take pills to maintain your heart, like in hypertension, we manage them the same way because we're trying to control the levels of specific brain chemicals. So consulting with your professional or your care team is important to know whether you go off a medication or not. But in terms of recovery, the majority of people we see who follow the regimen actually do recover fully to a place where they are able to contribute back to society. So you see, people will talk about side effects, but side effects are only there because you're not consulting with your professional. You are taking the medication as you will it. When I'm not well, I buy, I take. It doesn't work that way. Every time you need to go on medication, they have to run a different set of labs and see to what level you're supposed to take that medication. So my encouragement, especially for mental health awareness, is if you're giving any treatments, you have a problem with it on side effects, you want to stop, don't do it on your own. Consult your care provider before you do that. Thank you.
Look, we have 2 questions online. We have 2 questions online. If I may read the first one out, then you can. This is from an anonymous attendee. She says, you mentioned that we should get good enough sleep. Is there a recommended number of hours of sleep? We often hear 8 hours. Is it true?
Absolutely. And I think I said this earlier that you transition. You have 4 transitions you do in every round of sleep, and it takes approximately 90 minutes. And within that 90 minutes, the body releases a number of restorative properties. So during the day, you battle the day, and whoever created the world and the human being architectured for us to have self, restoration. So fun fact, one of the reasons why you want to sleep and sleep well is to reduce the tendency for majority of the lifestyle disorders we have: cancer, diabetes, lupus, cardiovascular related issues. They are all inflammatory disorders. Now, the body produces anti-inflammatory agents during sleep. So if you're not sleeping a lot, that's what's happening. Even depression, if you scan the brain, you notice that it is inflamed. And we normally would say 5 of those cycles, so 5 of the 90 minute cycles put you around 7:30. And so when we say 8, it's not just an ad hoc figure. It's because that's the optimum level. At the same time, once you exceed 9 hours, it becomes detrimental. So the analogy of sleep is to think of it this way. I own a fuel station and I have thousands of gallons of fuels in my tanks underground. I drive a car that takes just 10 gallons. I can only take 10 gallons at a time. That's what sleep is. And for sleep also, you can't front load sleep. Like some people say, let me work the whole week and I'll sleep during the weekend. Unfortunately, you can't front load sleep. You will be making up, but at the same time, it's detrimental. So look at sleep as an all or nothing event. In every day, you require it. You require water every single day. You require food for energy every single day. Same thing with sleep. Now, on the pillars of health, they would normally state exercise, diet, and sleep. But the interesting thing? Without sleep, exercise and diet don't have the best effect. So you must first look at the foundation of those other 2 pillars is actually sleep. And I could go on about sleep for 10 hours. Maybe we'll hold that for another day. Yes.
So another question. It is all well and good to practice these activities, but for busy professionals, what practical steps can one take to maintain good mental health?
Absolutely.
And avoid or effectively manage burnout?
Absolutely. This is a very good question, and I'm glad the person asked because I missed it. I didn't talk about it. So for the first time in forever, occupational burnout became a diagnosis, as it were, in the International Classification of Disease. So in those days, if I wanted to give someone time off work, there was no way I could write burnout. But now I can, because there's a legal document that backs it. And they give us 3 recommendations of what to do to avoid burnout. They talk about breaks. as the major thing, but they have 3 levels. So macro breaks, meso breaks, and micro breaks. Now, for macro breaks, what they say is that for every month, you must take at least half a day or 1 day off to do everything except work for yourself. For meso breaks, within the 24-hour cycle, you must take at least 1 hour to do something other than work. And for micro breaks, for every hour of work you do, you must take 5 minutes of break to do something different. These allow yourself. So let me paint a picture. If I were to ask all of us to just stretch our arm like this, okay? You might be able to do it very easily. And if I kept us going like this for 1 hour, your arm would get extremely heavy. Okay? Now, if you were to bring your hand down after 1 hour and lift it again, you could go another hour and you just keep doing that. That's the essence of taking breaks. The other thing, so in exercising, we tell lots of people that being able to find alternative ways of keeping yourself active is important. So in the clinic, for example, instead of using the elevator, I'd use the stairs. And I noticed that one day I'd gone up the stairs and I was panting. I said, you are too young for this. Now I've done this so much that even when I go up the stairs, I don't even break sweat. So those are some of the little things. Now, some people try to make up for their daily steps. And I tell lots of people, if you work in an institution where you are required to authenticate things where other people send emails, when you do send the email, walk to that person, try and make up for the physical activity component and say, I've sent you a mail. It's not because it's not for them. It's really for yourself. So those are like a few things. And I always also encourage people to learn the ways to stretch when they're at work. So when you sit for a while, there are many different stretches in ergonomics, which is another, for another day, but very important. Then they allow for the muscles to maintain their flexion, which is also good. Thank you. Yes. Please, there's someone.
Yes. Okay, in-house.
Yeah. My question, when we were in school, there was this guy that usually he'll be there and he'll be using his head to hit the wall because he wants to forget something that he has probably done in the past, or either squeeze his eyes or something, or probably he'll be there and be shouting just to forget about something that came in his mind, something he's done in the past. I don't know, how does the person handle such situations?
So, it's interesting, and it depends on where it's stemming from. So, for example, there are 2 things that come to my mind. The first one could be more of a trauma-related memory, which is something that happened in the past, and when it's happening now, you feel it. So, for example, let me create a very gory analogy. No, I won't. I will traumatize everybody. But think about something that makes you cringe, okay? When you feel it, you don't want to think about it, so you attempt to distract yourself. Now, it turns out that pain is one of those very quick ways to alternate yourself from any other region back into the present. There is something in the brain. So if you've ever been in a car, you weren't driving, someone's driving, you are sleeping, and then they see a big pothole. I do that a lot of the time when people sleep in my car. They bump the pothole, and you see your head, and then you wake up and you are very alert. Have you noticed that? You don't wake up drowsy. You wake up very alert. Exactly. So the same pain or the bumping of the head could be one of those things to, as it were, reorient them, because emotional pain is like an itch in your head that you can't scratch. Okay, and that could come from trauma, or it could also come from someone who's actively hallucinating. And I spoke about hallucinations earlier. If someone's hearing voices in his head, these are voices that are not directing the person to do something. They are commenting in his head. Just imagine a political panel in your head, just talking. To forget it, you may attempt to do something to get you back on track. So it does happen. But in trauma, there are many things that we can do to, as it were, to clear it out. So if you still know that person, tell them that we are here for them. And it doesn't mean that they are mad, because that's the word that seems to permeate mental health. But mental health, mental illness are two different things. And it encompasses emotions, it encompasses dealing with stress, it encompasses the lifestyle and the relationships we have, and not just when the thinking faculty has been impacted. Thank you.
Doc, I think that there's, we have pastors, we have counselors, and then we have professionals. I want to know whether there's any form of collaboration, because sometimes when people see counselors, they say, oh, that's the end. There's nothing wrong with you, but there could be something wrong with the person mentally that they have to refer to a professional. So how are you collaborating with them? And then also, how are you making it easier for people to visit mental facilities comfortably?
Okay. So with the first one, let me say that the Ghana Psychological Council, for starters, seems to regulate the practice. Now, I always encourage people that when you see a professional, please, it is your right to ask them, what are your credentials? If I came to look for a lawyer in a certain field, I will ask for credentials, wouldn't I? So it is your right, and it's your duty also to be sure that whoever you are speaking to knows what they are doing. A lot of people purport to be, they are not. But if the person has a recognition from the Ghana Psychological Council, then please feel free and do that. Second thing about how do we make it easy for people to access the services. So a strategic thing that has been done is that they incorporated mental health into primary health care. In essence, every single health facility should have a mental health location of sorts, okay? And if you've ever come to where I am, Kolebu, you feel like you're out of the country. And we call it stigma reduction through architecture. Beautiful place. So lots of people now say, just because of your building. In the past, the settings for mental health related things always looked like, yes, of course, the health budget gets just -1, below 1%. So obviously it's understandable. But things have changed also. The onset of online therapy, and a lot of people who are actually interested. So I've been called mad people's doctor in the past. But today what I find is people like to say, I have a shrink. So I think things are changing. So hallelujah.
Hello, doctor. So I heard of a story where somebody, a group of friends, they were using recreational drugs like cannabis. And this was a few years ago. So all the friends in that group are very fine, and even up to now, they sometimes indulge. But just one person since then he hasn't been normal since. And I guess my question is, do recreational drugs have the power to permanently or long-term alter the brain chemistry, or it's like...
Before you even end, big yes. Okay. A big yes. So classically, what a lot of people see out there on the street that they call mad, okay, is what we call psychotic disorder. And one of the very specific psychotic disorders is schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia, in terms of how the etiology of schizophrenia is excess dopamine. And that excess dopamine you get from recreational drugs. So, naturally, the brain releases dopamine every time you achieve something. And that achievement translates to your survival, okay? So when you eat, the brain releases dopamine and tells you, basically, remember to eat again for survival. When you have sex, the brain releases dopamine. Remember to do it again, but this time for procreation, survival of the species, the human species. When you have passed your law exams, the brain releases dopamine, tells you do more. So you celebrate, okay? Now, the essence of all of this is to motivate you to do more. And the brain releases this in like teaspoons. When you smoke marijuana, the brain releases it in like a bucket. So look at the difference. So over the time, what starts to happen is that your brain craves rewards without anything. It's not done anything, but it wants rewards. Now, imagine that I were rewarded all the time for doing nothing. I wouldn't achieve anything. So that's why for a lot of people, when they start consuming, at some point their life is all about the consumption. And it's classic for all the addictions. They'll stop everything else and focus on the next fix because their brain now needs it just to feel normal. And truthfully, people have different neurochemistries. In common parlance, they say our blood is different. So somebody may smoke a joint and be okay. Another bad person smokes a joint and there's no problem. And my advice is usually, if you haven't started, don't start. It gets worse that when you start early, it's more difficult for you to regulate because the regulatory part of the human brain develops after 24 years. And that's why when children start things that are too exciting early in life, they get addicted because control is not built. So a lot of the research would tell you people who started certain behaviors after 24 seem to have it under wraps a little better. So that's what I would say. But yes, the dopamine hypothesis is accurate. Excess dopamine has been implicated in the cause of hallucinations and delusions, which are predominant in schizophrenia.
All right. Please, we have a few questions online.
Okay.
One, how does one deal with a toxic work environment? Should one confront their colleagues or should one just bury their feelings and make the money?
Bury feelings, no. So think about emotions. Emotions are just like a flowing source of water. When it's flowing, it's always fresh. If you block it at one side, it will start to breed bacteria, etc., etc. So if you attempt to, so there's a way of acceptance which is different from burying. Acceptance is this person, that's how they are. And I understand them to that extent. So when they do the things, it doesn't shake me anymore. But if they do something and it unsettles you, but you can't speak about it, you tend to suffer. Now, I tell people that within every challenge are two things: the challenge and the lessons. So if you focus on the challenge, you can get stagnant. You can get stuck on the challenge. And those are very classic of people who complain. They complain about everything, but they will never do anything to get away from it. So they are not solution oriented. They just love the complaint. Now, I ask the question, what can I control in this dynamic? And if I can control something little, I hold on to it for the moment. That's not saying that it means it's okay, but that would be reducing the tension or the stress that it creates a little bit more. And it's not always that. So I do a lot of corporate wellness, and I have a lot of people who talk about the institution has not done, and I ask, but what have you done? Because there are always personal level factors and organizational level factors. And if you focus on what I can do during this period, is that I'll make sure that after the heated stress at work, when I go home, I will relax. I will sleep. That is personal level, and it keeps you going until you can find a more permanent solution. So that is how I would address that.
Okay. The next question is, what should one do if they feel overwhelmed but cannot afford therapy?
Well, it's very simple. It's all about education. Thankfully, you don't need therapy if you have a phone. I mean, you need therapy when it's excessive, but if you can't afford therapy, you have a phone. Read about the concepts. The education is enough. Just understanding what stress does, what you can do. And there are a lot of self-help tips. Like I said, I shared earlier today about perspective taking. You don't need a therapist to do perspective taking all the time. You don't need a therapist to put yourself on an exercise regimen or to get a hobby or to eat right. So I would say get more information about mental health, its impact, and what you can do. Those are still personal level factors.
Please, there's a question on loneliness. How does loneliness affect the brain and emotional stability over time?
Well,
Being alone.
the biggest thing about loneliness is that loneliness means you're not engaging. So the research tells you that the brain starts to even shrink at a point because you're not engaging very much. Human beings are hardwired to connect. We crave connection. During COVID, I don't know if anybody experienced this, but if you weren't seeing people, You craved people. You just wanted to see people. And I remember I would stand on top there and be just looking at the street to see if one goat will pass. That's what we are. And if you're not connecting to people, you imagine, why do you think that in prison they put people in isolation? The punishment, what was the punishment for being in isolation? Nothing happens to them, but they're isolated from stimulation, from humans, from other people. And it starts to break people down. So that's one of the things. Now, in terms of emotional stability, human beings connect and express together. It's very difficult to just be there and be walking, things are hard for me. We'll look at you with a certain eye. But when you connect with people, you are expressing, you're talking, and you are shedding some of the load. So you are in tune with the emotions and you are letting them out. So you are more stable. And if you're not doing that and it stays within you, you get more volatile and you might react to the least provocation. And it has nothing to do with it. A lot of the times when we are angry, our anger is not premised on what happened, but it's an accumulation of other things. So yes, that's...
Okay, so this is a comment. A 2016 American Bar Association study on lawyer well-being reported 12.5% of lawyers having ADHD. The bar here may not have run such a study, but kindly sensitize the bar on such issues so members can be supported.
Okay. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, in ADHD, we're looking at a number of components. One is inattention, two is hyperactivity, and three is impulsivity, okay? So in inattention, such people, like you speak to them, but they are not paying enough attention for it to make an impression. So it's like they are always forgetting, they are making little mistakes every now and then. In hyperactivity, they just like to move. The brain is wired in a way where if they are not moving or they are not stimulated, they feel a sense of stress. And in impulsivity, they act out of 10, they speak out of 10, they might even say things that are uncensored out of 10. Typically, most ADHDs are diagnosed in childhood. And many people get better or they adapt to the symptoms, as they grow. They basically build coping resources around it. Now, I tell people that the diagnosis for ADHD in itself is not a bad thing, because what then happens is the brain compensates for itself in a way. So I have always struggled with inattention. So I can't keep my attention locked for a long time. But what I can consume, the amount of information I consume in that short time where I have attention is magnificent. Just like the blind person. They hear sharper than usual. They smell more significantly than usual. So the brain always finds ways to do this. And in extreme cases, I'd say, well, if you think that you're struggling with all of these in extremes, and it's affecting productivity, it's affecting relationships, please, we're available for you. You can come and then we can help you through that process.
Okay, another one here. I think now we are getting quite a number, but this is the last but one.
Okay.
How do we support someone who refuses help but is clearly struggling?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So a lot of the time, the typical Ghanaian and African person wants to be so helpful it gets painful. We want to be too helpful, it gets painful. So I notice someone's going through a challenge and I want to force them to get help. Unfortunately, they won't. Now, the best thing you can do is to make them realize that you always be there. And even for me as a professional, there are times where people send me clients and I notice they are not ready. And all I tell them is, you know what? I know you're going through something. I don't know what it is. I know you're also trying to figure it out. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. Don't feel that you don't want to do it now means that I will reject you in the future. No. So let it be on their own terms. And every now and then, if you get resources that will further build their insight, send it to them. Don't aggressively, you have to eat. No. You mean well, but during certain times, people cannot hear it in the same way. So show them that you are available. Don't force them. When it's time, they will come.
Okay, there's an interesting one here. I could be sitting down in thought and realize I am hearing voices, like a drama, playing out while I watch. This often happens, especially when I'm about falling asleep. I think this started way back at the university before I had kids, so I won't say it's stress. What could be causing this? I'm sound though, she asks.
Well, so it depends. So for us, one of the things we look out for to say that somebody is hallucinating from an auditory standpoint is to ask the question, are you hearing another voice through your ears? Now, sometimes people also have what we call obsessional thought, where you say, I'm hearing it in my head. And those are they are two different things. It turns out that for people that do a lot of reflection, they sometimes hear a voice. And I will ask the question, the voice you hear, is it male or female? And if I'm male, I expect that the voice is male. It's more like I'm hearing myself talk to myself, kind of. So it's not worrisome. Whatever it is something that if we do an assessment, there's a challenge, we can simply help mitigate. But then if you're hearing it through your ears, that's more likely a hallucination. If you're hearing it in your head, that's more likely what we call an obsessional thought. So, yeah, we will not finish it here.
I think that's the last question. I don't know, Doc, if you have any closing statement to make.
Yes.
Otherwise, we will bring this session to.
My final comment would be, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Go and spread the word. And please do not equate mental health to mental illness. They are two different things. Remember, the power to enhance your mental health is in your hands. And anybody that's struggling, there's help out there. If you can't help them, point them in the right direction. And take care of your mental health. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Doctor. We are so grateful to you for what you've shared with us today. In fact, we've learned a lot, and some of us have learned that we need to adjust certain aspects of our lives. What I've learned today is not to wake up and tap my phone for the lights to come up, just to check the time to see whether or not I have an hour or 2 hours more. This is something that most of us can relate to. We must, at least for now, I've learned to adjust by what? I'm going to introduce alarm, so that when I wake up and I haven't heard the alarm, I continue with my sleep. So thank you so very much. And I think one of the things we also learned is that you discovered that when it comes to some of the ways that we can control these things, we noticed that it doesn't take so much. Talking about relaxation, right? Showing gratitude, and then ensuring that you are having a good sleep. These are things that do not require that we spend so much on. So we can do so much to help ourselves in terms of our mental health, so that we will not have to end up having to spend so much on therapy. So let's make sure that all that we've been told today, whatever your lifestyle is, which areas, I mean, the symptoms that he mentioned, these are things that if you stay in Accra, work in Accra, practice law, you discover that there are times when you are writing a brief, you are putting something together. And even when you are in bed, you are rehearsing your arguments. Sometimes you would notice that before you realize the date, you haven't slept, so you wake up and you are tired. Or because when you are in bed, you are actually thinking about what would be the area of law that would be needed to resolve this matter. But at least with all that we've learned, we realize that we should prioritize and ensure that our mental health, and ensure that at the center of our life is our wellness, that we are ensuring that we are able to continue to practice, stay healthy, so that we will be able to be more productive at workplace. So let me thank you once again. For all those who join us online, we are grateful to you for your time. We know that we are getting close to the end of the legal year. There's so much to do. So an hour and a half is quite some time, but we are happy that we're able to tune in and to be part of this session. From us as Greater Accra, we continue to announce further programs in the course of the year. So at this time, I'll hand over to our Assistant Secretary to let you know of what we have for you for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, our Vice President. So this, by way of announcement, The first has to do with Bar Conference in Adan, and we've circulated a date and some information on it. It's from the 13th to the 18th of September, 2026. I'm sure further details will be published by the national executives. Then our vice president spoke about our library project in Kase Adan. We are all encouraged to contribute meaningfully towards a worthy cause. Construction has started. I'm sure you saw the videos and pictures from the speech of the vice president. Then the third item is the Greater Accra Law Week. I thought you say hooray. The 2026 Greater Accra Law Week would include a legal outreach on the 11th of July, and this is being done in collaboration with the judiciary. So if you could please note it in your diaries, 11th July, we'll have a legal outreach together with the judiciary. Martyrs' Day, as usual, is on the 30th of June. That's about a month away. So kindly take note. Details will be published through the mail and other communication channels. And then we have the media conference slated for 5th June. And national executives will also provide further details of it. I don't know whether there are any other announcements, but we'll take this opportunity to, since I'm the MC and we don't have... before that, okay.
So, Doc, this is a present to you from the Greater Accra Regional Bar for your time with us here. We know that you have so much use for your time, but you've been able to share some with us. We are grateful to you. Thank you very much. Sir.
That's another announcement. In the absence of any further comments or sessions, I'm sure we can bring today's very fruitful session to a close. And I'll be forced again to pray, since I'm sharing the day with our Vice President, who usually prays for us. So shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to meet as a bar to discuss this very important matter of wellness. We thank you for the resource person that he has been very, very impactful this afternoon. We pray that we are not only hearers of this word, but we will also be doers as well. And we pray for your enabling spirit to help us to live well and healthy. We ask these and many other blessings through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, and may you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you. Actually,
We learned a lot.
take the time.
We learned a lot.
You're most welcome.
Problem of phone and all that. Getting up and hitting the phone to look at the time.